On this Friday night, new legal twist. Why the jury has been dismissed at the Hockey Canada sex assault trial. What happens now and the details we can report after a publication ban was lifted. Manitoba's out-of-control wildfires. Why the rain is not providing relief. Uphill battle.
All the glitches that are happening have been creating a lot of confusion.
The problems frustrating people trying to join the Canadian military. Plus, what could be in store for Hudsons Bay?
I thought it was the best news possible.
The optimism about the future of Canada's oldest retailer as it rolls on with Canadian Tire.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The sex assault trial of 5 former World Junior hockey players has taken another significant legal turn. The judge in the London, Ontario courtroom dismissed all 12 jurors today, and all sides have now agreed to proceed by judge alone. Nathaniel Dove was in the courtroom as all of this unfolded and joins us now to walk through what happened and where the case goes from here.
Carolyn, this is the second time Judge Maria Carosia dismissed a jury in the Hockey Canada World Juniors sex assault trial. She dismissed the first jury after a mistrial 3 days after proceedings began. Now, the change to a judge-only trial Friday means that we can now report on new information we previously couldn't because a publication ban has been lifted. I have determined in this case that it is appropriate to discharge the jury, the judge told the court. The complainant, known as EM, accused players Cal Foote, Carter Hart, Michael McLeod, Dylan Dubé, and Alex Formenton of having non-consensual group sex with her at a hotel in London, Ontario in 2018. They have all pleaded not guilty. The judge dismissed the jury because one juror sent Carosia a note stating they believe Alex Formenton's lawyers, Daniel Brown and Hilary Dudding, quote, turn to each other and laugh as if they are discussing our appearance when the jury enters the room. The judge said she was concerned this could impact some jury members' ability to fairly decide this case and that it could have a chilling effect on the defense lawyers. The defense attorneys denied the claim, saying in a statement, the very idea of counsel making light of a juror is illogical and runs directly counter to our purpose and function. Dudding was also involved in the reason for the first mistrial. A juror accused her of initiating a conversation while in line for lunch at a nearby restaurant. Dudding denied this, saying she said sorry after bumping into the juror. The judge described the incident as innocuous, but went on to declare a mistrial. The trial resumed Friday with a member of the 2018 team who was not charged continuing his testimony. Tyler Steenbergen says he was in the hotel room with the 5 accused and the complainant for about 10 to 15 minutes. He said EM was asking players to have sex with her and that players declined. A member of McLeod's defense team asked, no one wants to have sex with her in front of everyone, and so I take it there was some conversation about oral sex and stuff. Fair? Steenbergen said, yeah. The defense asked, and that's something that she willingly offered to do. Steenbergen said, yes. A criminal defense lawyer not connected to the case says proceeding by judge only protects procedural fairness.
It really is just shifting who the trier of fact is now. So this is the way that the trial is the least impacted.
Proceeding by judge only means EM does not have to testify again. She testified for 9 days, including 7 days of, at times, grueling cross-examination as she relayed what she says happened to her. Carolyn?
Nathaniel Dove in London, Ontario. Thank you. Rain in Manitoba today is helping firefighters battle multiple blazes across the province, though it hasn't extinguished concerns over some of the biggest fires burning right now. Some areas of the province remain under a state of emergency. Melissa Ridgen joined us from Winnipeg with more on the situation. Melissa.
Carolyn, yes, it's been steady showers here since Thursday evening, and many parts of the province are enjoying the rain that's forecasted to continue through Saturday, but not everyone is getting enough to make a difference. Environment Canada tells us the Lac de Bonnie area only got a sprinkling, not enough to make a big difference. The rural municipality of Piney, about 15 millimeters so far. That area is still evacuated. Whiteshell Provincial Park, which was closed and evacuated ahead of the long weekend, around 8 millimeters of rain. That fire is more than 93,000 hectares in size now. But with the rain that started Thursday night, new problems. This thunderstorm near Sperling, Manitoba appears to show a tornado or a landspout, one of 3 spotted. There's no reports of any damage. Southwestern Manitoba, an overland flooding watch was issued there due to heavy rain. Just over the border in Ontario, 2 fires are burning. Wabsamung First Nation was evacuated, and fire crews on land and in the air continue to fight those fires. And in Saskatchewan, people in Candle Lake have been told to be ready to possibly evacuate as 3 fires burn in that area. Many are still waiting to learn if their property has been impacted in all these fire zones, while others get bad news.
I opened my Facebook, and the first thing that popped up was, I guess the algorithms found me. The start of the video started, and I recognized the boathouse, and I went, oh no. And certainly that is, I just saw cabin after cabin burning, and ours was the last one.
Now cherishing these memories even more. Meanwhile, counseling services have been brought into Lac de Bonnie, mourning Sue and Richard Noel, who died trying to escape fire there on Tuesday. While the fire situation is improving, officials are keeping evacuation orders in many places to be extra cautious after those deaths. One thing is certain, this very typical May-long weekend of cold, wet weather that's not usually appreciated as folks want to officially kick off summer, this time it's been welcomed by basically everyone here in Manitoba. Carolyn?
Melissa Ridgen, thank you. A new report is calling for sweeping changes at Canada Post, including phasing out daily door-to-door mail delivery. According to the Industrial Inquiry Commission's report, daily mail delivery should continue for businesses, but not individual addresses, in an effort to reverse the growing financial losses at the company. It goes on to say the Crown Corporation is effectively insolvent or bankrupt. Canada Post and the union have been urged to return to the bargaining table following this week's pause in negotiations. A strike or lockout could begin as early as next week if a deal isn't reached. A preliminary report by the City of Vancouver and its police department into last month's deadly Lapu Lapu Day Festival attack says the event was well organized and safety rules were followed. Officials say they are considering safety enhancements for outdoor events after 11 people were killed and dozens of others injured. Heavy barriers were not in place when an SUV sped through a crowded street. Mayor Ken Sim says it's time to rethink risk assessment.
One of the most urgent challenges we now face is how to protect people from the growing threat of vehicles being used to cause harm.
16 new 320-kilogram mobile barriers arrived in Vancouver yesterday. A centralized database will also be updated to track and monitor risks and improve coordination with upcoming event organizers. The final report will be released by August 27th. A judicial recount has confirmed the Liberal Party's victory in the Ontario riding of Milton East, Halton Hills South. The Conservatives won the riding on election night, but after Election Canada's validation process, it was determined the Liberals actually won. The narrow result triggered an automatic judicial recount that confirmed a Liberal victory by 21 votes. The Liberals are 2 seats shy of a majority government. Prime Minister Mark Carney is flying to Europe tonight to attend Pope Leo's inaugural Mass at the Vatican on Sunday. He's also planning to meet with several world leaders to discuss Canadian sovereignty and trade. Our Mackenzie Gray will be traveling with the Prime Minister on his first trip to Europe since being elected. Mackenzie.
For the Prime Minister, Carolyn, this trip to Italy is one part personal, one part political. On the personal side, Mark Carney's a practicing Catholic, finding time nearly every Sunday during the election to attend church here in Ottawa. And the importance of his faith could be seen when Carney spoke at length about his admiration for Pope Francis after he died.
Pope Francis was a voice of moral clarity, spiritual courage, and boundless compassion. He was, in many respects, the world's conscience, never hesitating to challenge the powerful on behalf of the vulnerable.
Carney has said that on issues like abortion, his politics deviate from the church.
I absolutely support a woman's right to choose unreservedly, and will defend it as the Liberal Party has defended it proudly and consistently. I will defend the Charter proudly and consistently.
On the political side, the Pope's inauguration presents an opportunity to meet with multiple key allies, with leaders from the European Union, Italy, and Australia all coming to the inauguration, helping Mark Carney's bid to continue to work to diversify the Canadian economy away from the Americans. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance will also be in attendance from the Trump administration, but there's no indication that he'll meet with the Prime Minister. For Carney personally, the most meaningful conversation will likely take place with Pope Leo, Carolyn, with the pair expected to meet after the inauguration is finished.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thank you. In the lead up to the G7's Leaders Summit in Kananaskis, Alberta next month, Canada is playing host to smaller events, including the B7. It's a meeting of global business leaders, and it took place in Ottawa this week. David Aiken joins us with more. And David, I understand there was much discussion of Trump's trade disruptions.
Well, Carolyn, speaker after speaker at this B7 summit spoke about the end of the old ways of doing global trade.
We're increasingly in a world that we describe as one of unbalanced multipolarity rather than the globalized world that we've all been used to.
And it was clear to all who spoke that Donald Trump's tariff wars are to blame.
The U.S. is now a generator of geopolitical risk.
Gerald Butts was a key advisor to Justin Trudeau, and he played a key role advising Mark Carney during the election.
My sense is we're only at the beginning of it, and there is a lot more turbulence to come.
And that turbulence creates all sorts of problems for businesses around the world as they consider new hiring or new supply chain decisions.
I mean, realistically, business craves stability and predictability, and we are in an inherently unpredictable period.
Nikki Haley ran against Donald Trump in the Republican primary, and she had this advice for B7 leaders.
I would say don't assume that the U.S. doesn't want to do business with your country. They actually do want to do business with your country. It's just messy right now.
The new U.S. ambassador to Canada told the B7 that Trump expects G7 economies like Canada to step up on defense and security.
Work with us on economic issues, work with us on the friendships and the relationships that we have on a personal basis around the world, and work with us on security issues.
The B7 has dozens of recommendations for G7 leaders to consider when they meet next month in Kananaskis, but the most important one is a plea for stability and predictability. But few at the B7 summit believe that Trump can deliver either. Carolyn.
David Aiken in Ottawa, thank you. Well, it was a rough end to the week for millions in the eastern U.S. after severe storms tore through the area. Michigan and Wisconsin are recovering from torrential rain, hail, and tornadoes causing power outages for hundreds of thousands. The same damaging weather hammered Kentucky and Tennessee. Tornado and flood warnings were also issued along the East Coast, with conditions expected to continue through tomorrow. The first meeting between Ukraine and Russia in years coming up. What they agreed on and what still has yet to be resolved. After days of posturing and theatrics, the first face-to-face meeting between Russia and Ukraine in more than 3 years ended in less than 2 hours. Both sides agreed to a large prisoner swap, but they are far apart on key conditions to end the war. Russia says it is satisfied with the talks. Ukraine says Russia's demands are unacceptable. Redmond Shannon reports on the whiplash week of diplomacy that's landed Ukraine nearly back to where it started.
Turkish moderators didn't get to greet any presidents, but this was an in-person meeting more than 3 years in the making. The last time delegates from both sides of the war met was just days after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That meeting was also in Turkey when they could not strike a deal. On Friday, there was one tangible result.
We have agreed to exchange 1,000 persons to 1,000.
The largest prisoner swap of the conflict. But on other matters, the two sides remain far apart.
There were a number of things that, of course, were unacceptable.
Ukraine's team gave no details, but Russia's demands likely include that Ukraine give up the 5 Ukrainian regions Russia fully or partially controls.
If you want to have serious negotiations, you need to have guns silent. This is logical.
Alongside a ceasefire, Ukraine wants both presidents, Zelensky and Putin, to meet face-to-face. Russia's delegation leader, an aide to Vladimir Putin, said that would be considered. The Kremlin earlier said a Putin-Trump meeting is crucial for peace.
When do you think you'll meet President Putin?
As soon as we can set it up.
Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, who said he was prepared to meet Putin in Turkey Friday, went instead to a European summit in Albania.
Our number one priority is a full, unconditional and honest ceasefire.
After joining a phone call between Trump and Zelensky, Ukraine's European allies are threatening more of the tactic that has so far failed to stop Putin's war on Ukraine. Sanctions. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Palestinians are sifting through piles of debris from a deadly Israeli bombardment. Dozens of strikes across Gaza killed at least 108 people, including women and children. Local health authorities say more than 250 people have died since yesterday, one of the deadliest phases since the collapse of a truce in March. Israel is intensifying its military campaign despite growing international pressure to resume ceasefire talks and end its aid blockade of Gaza. U.S. President Donald Trump, who ended a Mideast tour today, acknowledged people are starving, but says we have to look at both sides. The man who stabbed author Salman Rushdie has been sentenced to 25 years in prison.
Everybody's entitled to have different views and different opinions about things.
The New York judge saying he finds it truly disturbing that Hadi Matar thinks his actions were justified. Matar stabbed Rushdie more than a dozen times at a writers' conference in New York in 2022, leaving him blind in one eye. Matar faces separate federal charges. Personnel crisis ahead. The rollout problems plaguing the Canadian military's new recruitment portal. The Canadian military has launched a new tool to drive up recruitment and solve a personnel shortage that's now in sharper focus with U.S. President Donald Trump threatening Canadian sovereignty. The Canadian Armed Forces needs more than 14,000 troops. But despite attempts to streamline the application process with a new online portal, technical glitches are only adding to the frustration. Taria Isri reports.
Go up the hill right to the crest.
The Canadian military is desperate to fill its ranks. This is meant to help, a new online recruitment portal. But the rollout has been rocky.
All the glitches that are happening have been creating a lot of confusion and frustration for applicants.
Users have received error messages like this one. One frustrated applicant who's trying to re-enlist spoke to Global News and says it took him dozens of attempts over 3 days to set up a profile. He asked that he not be identified over concerns it could jeopardize his application. Any enthusiasm I had for re-enlisting has completely evaporated.
The Canadian military is undergoing a very broad digital modernization process. This, quite frankly, has been an enormous undertaking. Canada, generally speaking, has lagged behind.
The Department of Defense acknowledged issues were discovered in early March after the new portal's initial rollout, saying the system was not able to handle the volume of traffic and that the problems have since been rectified.
What's your number one priority right now for the Canadian military?
It is really personnel.
The military's ongoing recruitment crisis has come into renewed focus as U.S. President Donald Trump insists on making Canada the 51st state.
But I say, never say never.
The Prime Minister has said never. Mark Carney appointed a new defense minister this week and is vowing to rebuild the Canadian Armed Forces.
How do we harness that desire from young Canadians to serve their country? This is what the Canadian Armed Forces has to update their thinking and, it seems, their technology.
The Canadian military plans to get back to full personnel levels over the next 4 years. That's 71,000 regular force members and 30,000 reservists. It's a timeline that defense experts say Canada can't afford to push back. Carolyn?
Taria Isri in Montreal, thank you. A new home for one of Canada's most iconic brands. Next, details on the deal to keep the Bay Stripes in Canada. Two longtime rival sports retailers have announced they're teaming up. Dick's Sporting Goods is buying Foot Locker for $2.4 billion. Dick's says it expects to run Foot Locker as a standalone unit and keep the Foot Locker brands, which includes Champs Sports. Shoppers in Canada are celebrating news that this country's oldest brand will stay in Canada. Late yesterday, Canadian Tire announced it plans to buy the Bay's intellectual property after that company filed for creditor protection back in March. It means products with those iconic stripes and coat of arms will be able to be sold at Canadian Tire stores. Dan Spector has reaction to the $30 million deal.
Shoppers are picking over the final items still left at the Bay's flagship store in downtown Montreal. After weeks of liquidation, the iconic Canadian retailer is just a shell of its once mighty self.
Yeah, it is pretty empty, a lot of sheets.
Unable to pay its bills, the 355-year-old department store filed for creditor protection back in March. But though things are looking pretty bleak here, there's suddenly reason for optimism for fans of the embattled retailer. Thursday's acquisition means those famous stripes, logos, and other imagery could soon be in the hands of another historic Canadian brand.
I think that's really cool.
Perfect. We need that. I thought it was the best news possible.
This retail expert is thrilled.
A company like Canadian Tire, who's proudly Canadian, proudly ingrained in our communities, who actually knows how to run brands extremely well if we look at their brand portfolio.
He can only shake his head at the liquidation-worthy $30 million price tag, however. To him, a testament of how poorly the Bay was run.
If Canadian Tire manages properly, it will triple in value. You just have to see the attachment that Canadians have shown.
De Brabant thinks Hudsons Bay merchandise and other labels in the sale, like Gluckstein Home and Zellers, will fit right in at Canadian Tire.
Wouldn't be surprising to have a shop-in-shop concept around the Bay in many of the Canadian Tires.
Shoppers are just happy the brand that predates Confederation and began with the fur trade will be back in Canadian hands.
It's nice to know they're going to keep the tradition going with the colors and stuff. I think it's important to keep Canadian heritage going on, you know.
The sale is not a done deal yet. It still needs to be approved by the courts, but it's expected to go through this summer. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Tonight's Your Canada showcases a patriotic patio in Saskatoon, a yard in Canoe, BC, and some very Canadian plants in Battersea, Ontario. Please keep sending your pictures to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.